Welcome to the BJJ Mental Coach Podcast. I'm your host, Gustavo Dantas, and today we have Tim Welch. Tim is a black belt in jiu-jitsu under Augusto Mendes, Tanquinho. He's a former professional MMA fighter with 23 fights in his career. He currently owns and operates TW BJJ and MMA in Peoria, Arizona. He is Sean O'Malley's MMA head coach, and he also the host of two podcasts, Timbo and Sugar Show podcast and the Red Hawk Recap. Tim, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I've heard about your show for a while now, so I'm happy to come on.
Right on. Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about everything. At the beginning, there was a lot of entrepreneurship, and I still do talk about that mindset. And a lot is basically entrepreneurs who got lessons that they got in through martial arts and they apply in life and business. So that's kind of the main theme for the podcast. So tell us how martial arts got into your life, and then we just go from there.
Yeah, I was raised early on as a Jehovah's Witness, very religious, never able to play sports or be around worldly kids. So my parents got divorced when I was about in 8th grade. And I saw my dad watching some VHSs of the UFC when I was about 13, 14 years old. And then I got into wrestling in high school and I got into boxing in high school. And I did that for 4 years in high school. And then the day I turned 18, the day I was allowed to, I started fighting amateur fights. And I had 10 amateur fights, was going to college for fire science to be a firefighter. And then I had a professional fight and I got paid $1,000 to beat some guy up. And I was like, man, this is all I can think about. Instead of wasting money going to college, I'm just going to keep beating people up and getting paid for it. So then started fighting professionally at about 21 years old. I signed with Bellator and then moved to Portland, Oregon to train with Team Quest and had a couple fight camps there. And then my girlfriend and her family were opening a marijuana business here in Arizona. Yeah, so my girlfriend's parents, they moved down from Montana to open a marijuana business. They kind of were foreseeing the future and seeing it's going to be legal, so they came down here pretty early on in that stage. And I Googled gyms down here to visit my girlfriend, and I knew Benson Henderson trained down here, and he was the UFC lightweight champion at the time. So I came down, I messaged Coach John Crouch, set up a sparring session with Benson, came down and sparred him. And I was like, man, this is the place I need to be if I want to achieve what I want to achieve. So I packed my car up and I moved down here, and I've been here for about almost coming up 9 years now, been in Phoenix.
Right on. So how was the experience at Team Quest? Who was the head coach there? Because I know that Dan Henderson is the biggest name, right, from the Team Quest in a way. So they have a lot of high-level wrestlers, but how was the experience?
Yeah, the experience was good because I came from wrestling, and Matt Lindland, he was an Olympic silver medalist, Greco-Roman silver medalist. He was the head coach at the time, and the room was filled with a bunch of very good fighters: Yushin Okami, Chael Sonnen, Rick Story, Mike Pierce, a bunch of very good top-level wrestlers. And I was only 20 years old, 21 years old around that time. So I learned a lot of good lessons training with those guys. And a coach named Robert Fallis had a big impact on my life. And he was a big mentor in my life. He was raised a Jehovah's Witness also. And he's the one who kind of opened my eyes to reading and looking into stuff for yourself, and kind of don't take anyone's word for it. Look into it for yourself and start figuring things out. So I learned a lot of great lessons when I was living in Portland.
And how was with Dan Henderson? Man, if you put a list of some, like, I don't know, a top 5 guys in the world, or like people who fought like everyone, he's got to be in a top 5, top 10 or something, or guys that, like, the list of like tough dudes that guy fought is incredible.
Yeah, at that time, he opened up Team Quest Temecula in California, so he wasn't there while I was there. But all the guys who said a lot of stories said that he was just one of the meanest guys in the room and just super tough. But yeah, I've been a fan of him. He's been one of my favorite fighters for a long time.
Right on. And how was the experience? And then when you came in training with Ben, now from a different school, with John, of course, but training with Ben. So what are some of the things that you liked that was a good, like not an upgrade, but just a continuation of your career here in Arizona?
Yeah, it was a whole different program. The program up there was kind of based a lot around wrestling. There was just mostly wrestlers, and it was based a lot about not a ton of jiu-jitsu. You know, they weren't big on passing the guard and moving into a dominant position. They were big on sitting in the guard, covering the hips, posturing up, and beating on someone in the guard. So the style was a little different. When I came down to the MMA lab, that's when I met Tanquinho, and a bit at that time the training was quite a bit harder, so I wasn't really used to that, but it definitely made me level up pretty quick.
Right on. So when let's talk about a mindset when you start fighting. Even let's go back to the amateurs. Do you feel that when going into your first fight, did you feel anything different than wrestling, or you felt like it was a competition the same way, or you felt that it was a different vibe? And so how was the mindset?
Yeah, definitely different. I got in there. I'm used to wearing wrestling shoes, and I got in there and I didn't have wrestling shoes on, and I felt naked. And I was fighting this other guy who was a big, tall 185er. And the first thing in my mind is like, what am I doing? And then the bell rang, ding, ding. And I was like, well, I got to go do it. So I went out there, and it was the day I turned 18. And I got beat. I got TKO'd. And then I was like, man, I'm going to give it one more shot. And if I don't win this next fight, I'll probably just be done fighting. And then I won 9 fights straight. So I kept doing it.
Right on. So now how was so let's talk about some experiences that you had. We're going to talk about the good and the not so good, right? So one of your best performances that you ever had, regardless of result per se, because sometimes, you know, you can have an incredible performance, but the other person had an incredible performance as well. You lost a decision, so it's not necessarily about the result. But what is a fight that comes to your mind, an event that comes to your mind that you felt like your best, and what contributed for that, for you to feel the way you felt?
Yeah, I think I never really had a fight where I fought at my true potential. Never a fight when I really fought how I fight in the gym, you know. And I think it came down to I didn't start meditating and I didn't start like my mindfulness practice until way later in my life, almost after I was done fighting. And I think if I would have done that a little earlier on in my career, I think it would have been quite a bit different. But probably the best fight I had is for the Bellator Fight Master show. I had $0 in the bank. Literally, I couldn't even buy a coffee at the airport, and they flew out 16 of some of the best unsigned welterweights, and we didn't know who we were fighting until the day before. And if you lose, they send you home on a plane. And I knew I had no money at all. But if you win, you move into the house with all the fighters, and you get paid weekly, and then you get on the TV show. And that fight was pretty nerve-wracking. And I walked out there and I got matched up. You didn't know who you're going to get matched up with. You could get matched up with a Division I wrestler, great black belt in jiu-jitsu, or a really good striker. And I got matched up with a K1 kickboxer who's never been knocked out. And I knocked him out in the first round. So that was probably one of my better performances. But yeah, other than that, that's the only thing I kind of like. I look back at my fight career and I'm like, man, I wish I was able to fight and be in the moment like I am now, and know how have the tools to be in the moment and just be present and just be thinking about what I'm doing at that time.
Yeah, it's incredible how some people just able to discover that earlier in their careers. When they do and they're hard worker, man, they just goes like it goes way up, you know. So it's more and more people need to give that attention to exactly that mental preparation, because man, that's a because when you get to that level, everyone's well prepared and technical and tough and man, but definitely the mindset's going to be there. So I would say like whatever helped you that day maybe was I always mention how necessity is a hell of a motivation, you know what I mean? So you're there like, dude, I got zero money in the bank, so that's the motivation. Like, no, this needs to happen, you know. What about a not so good performance that you look back and say like, man, you know that you didn't perform to your potential, and what did you learn from it? Something that you can possibly like share with your fighters, your experience that you have, or more for the books. So what did you say?
Yeah, there's so many, but probably the biggest like kind of like heartbreaker letdown was my last fight a couple years ago. Dana White told me after the Ultimate Fighter, he said, win 3 more fights and I'll give you a deal. I won 3 more fights and he still didn't give me a deal. And I'm in great shape. I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to fight again. So I booked a fight in my hometown in Montana against a Canadian guy. The guy was like 8-4, a guy that I'm supposed to just beat up. And I went in there confident. I'm like, I'm going to kill this guy. And I went in there. The first punch of the fight, he hit me with an uppercut and he broke my jaw. Completely broke my jaw. And in the fight, I was like, oh shit, something's wrong. I can't close my mouth. I could know something's wrong. So I was like, I got to finish this. So I was really trying to go after the guy, but I don't know if my body was in shock or what, but I just felt weak and felt rushed. And I ended up getting finished that fight. So that put me on in Montana, you can't, it's a smaller place. So I couldn't get emergency surgery that night. So I had to sit for 2 days and I had to travel to another city with my jaw completely detached from my face. And I went to that place. They're like, man, you should have got surgery right away. So they had to kind of re-break it a little bit, line it up. And then they had to wire me shut for 7 weeks, completely shut. Yeah, completely shut, so tight to where even trying to talk, I'd get TMJ and I'd get bad headaches. And the only way you could eat is just get liquid through your teeth for 8 weeks. So that's when I started meditating and just reading. And I was like, fuck, there's only 2 options here. I could get hooked on pain pills, just numb myself and be really unhealthy, or I can just start to read and meditate. And I've gotten so much like growth from that injury, and it led me to where I'm at now. And I'm like, it's weird to say, but I'm so thankful that happened.
Yeah, and that a trip, that's something that once in a while I mention here. That's a mindset that I've been working on for the past few years, but that of not labeling so much what is positive, what is negative, or don't get your highs get too high, your lows get too low. It's one of the things this is an example. And for people who are listening, how many situations in your life that 5 years ago something happened that you said like, man, this is so negative. I can't believe this is happening. And now you look back and, man, where I'm at today because of that, was it negative? It was just an event. Now we can label it any way you want, but it's just an event. So that is a huge lesson. I think from what I get is, I think the lesson of sharing with your students, or not, like the importance of personal development, of like, understanding yourself, meditating, being, I didn't have any idea until my 30s about that too. Like I never even crossed my mind, that kind of stuff,
Yeah. I'm lucky. I kind of I stumbled upon like Tim Ferriss and his Tools of Titans and his Tribe of Mentors book. And he talked a lot about stoicism in there. So I started looking into stoicism, and then he talked a lot about all the people he would interview, all these powerful people. They would talk about how important meditation is in their life. So I was like, man, if all these important people are talking about it, maybe I'll give it a shot. And then he talked about podcasting a lot and what to start his podcasting. So he had a super big impact on a lot of the shit I've learned.
Yeah, actually I did too. When I got involved with basically my first exposure to some type of personal development, it was with The Secret, which a lot of people, people have mixed opinions about it. Of course, it's not just like, oh, I think about it and it happens. Of course, it's not that. You need to put a lot of action, and then, the law of attraction. But I just saw some of the speakers that was a movie, actually. It was a documentary or whatever. And then I watched some of the speakers that I connect with. Oh, it's pretty cool. And then I Googled it, and then I started to find some speakers that I connected, and then it just kind of went from there. And Tim Ferriss is another one that made a huge impact in my life as far as entrepreneurship. I don't know if you listen or read the 4 Hour Work Week. I don't know if you have heard of that, but that's one of Tim Ferriss that it made a big impact on me. I don't know if there's any words that you never like put thought to it. For instance, let me give an example. I don't know, for people who are listening too, sometimes, for example, the delegation. So like, do you know what delegate means? I'm like, hell yeah, I know what that means. But then I'm like, do you actually practice that? And he opened my eyes for that. Like, yeah, I know what delegation. Yeah. but he started to dive into. I never like really got into like understanding more or what is some of the stuff behind delegation. And that really opened my eyes to things like, yeah, you know, like, yeah, do I know? Yeah, sure. I know what that means, but like, do you really, really know?
Yeah.
So it's kind of almost like the meditation. Do you know what meditation is? Yeah, I know, but like, do you really,
Yeah.
you know, do you really understand the practice? So is there any word that comes to your mind with things like that, that with time you start to like, wait a minute, let me investigate a little bit more about this?
Yeah, well, definitely like mindfulness, you know, it's thrown around so much.
Yeah.
Around like, oh, mindfulness, but it's such a crazy thing, and it's such an important thing, especially this day and age with all the social media and all the stuff, especially like what I got going in my life, like the podcasts, my students, my gym, training sugar, training myself to keep trying to improve. I got a lot of things going on, and just being able to just quiet that and just be able to sit there. I think it's just so important.
Yeah. So how was your transition to open up your school, the business aspect of it, when you decided that it wasn't going to fight anymore? So how was that decision, and how did it go about?
Yeah, it came about pretty organically. I was living with Sugar Sean O'Malley when he was an amateur. I invited him down. I went up to commentate some fights in Montana, and I saw him as an amateur. And after one of the fights, I invited him down to come train with me. I said, "Hey, do you want to come train with some real pros?" And he was a little crazy teenager, and he's like, "Yeah, I'll do it." And he came down and he got beat up real bad, and was crying after every practice because he thought he was way tougher than he was. And he went back home, and I was like, I bet we probably won't see him again. But then he packed up his car and moved down, and me and him ended up getting an apartment. So I was kind of mentoring him. At that time, I think I had 15 professional fights. So I was kind of mentoring him to do the shit that, like the mistakes that I made, gave him back to him. And it just kind of organically grew into teaching him, and he started getting KOs. And then all of a sudden he's 7-0, 8-0, and now in the UFC. And that's when I kind of started moving towards teaching. And I was training at the lab a lot, but once I met Tanquinho, I went over there and got invited to their competition gi training, and it was mainly Brazilians over there. And I never really trained with real Brazilians in the gi. And I was like, man, these guys love jiu-jitsu. They love jiu-jitsu. They like, that's all they talk about. They don't just do it to be cool and stuff. And it really made me start loving jiu-jitsu and have a real deep love for jiu-jitsu. So then Tanquinho and Crouch gave me my brown belt. And then I started teaching at one of Tanquinho's affiliate schools. That school ended up dropping the program. So then I had the opportunity to open my own gym, and we started I found a mechanic shop to rent for about $900 a month. Cheap mechanic shop. We put mats in there, and then we grew the students, and we had like 15 and then 20 students. So I was like, oh shoot, this is actually working out. So then I found a little spot in Peoria. It's about 2,400 square feet of just pure mats. And now, yeah, the gym's doing great. I think we have a little over 100 members now, and I enjoy it so much. A lot of my students, they've found us through the podcast. So a lot of my students are super like-minded, and yeah, I got a pretty good balance now of just training myself, training Sugar, my students, and then my podcast. It keeps me pretty busy, but it's all stuff I really enjoy doing. So I don't feel like it's work at all.
Right on. So now, what did you say about as far as Sugar's mindset? I want to go first where he's at right now mentally, and then I want to go back a little. But I want you to just expand a little bit. What is something like a good differential that he has on his mindset currently?
Yeah, right now he's very, very disciplined. He's very disciplined. He's not the type of athlete that you have to text him and say, hey, get to the gym on time, or he doesn't come to the gym 15 minutes late. He comes 15, 20 minutes early. He's never missing any workouts. He's 15-1. That one loss was a little crazy, whatever, but he's very, very confident. You know, undefeated fighters, they don't know all the bad shit that can happen in a fight. And when you don't know all the bad shit that can happen in a fight, it's easy to be like super, super confident, you know, and he's that way. And he really is a freak athlete. He's really good at basketball. Any sports he does, he's been doing sports his whole life. So he's very athletic. He learns really well, and he's very disciplined, and he has a good coaching staff. So right now, I'd say mentally he's very, very strong and very confident, but there's still a lot of growth left in him.
Yeah, I think what catches my attention with him, and I think you can really notice, at least that's the perception that I have, that he's very loose in the cage. You know what I mean? Very comfortable. And that is huge. So that, at least that's what appears to me. He looks like, sometimes you see Conor, when he fights and see him loose and be like, oh boy, that dude is ready. You know what I mean? He's like, you can tell that he's loose. So is that accurate to say?
Yeah, it's super accurate to say. And that's one of the benefits from growing up in Montana. You can fight a lot. I think Sean had 13 amateur fights and like some smoker boxing fights. And yeah, I've had 16 smoker fights and 10 amateur fights. So you can fight a lot in Montana. So you really be able to get in that ring and be like, oh, I'm comfortable in here. I've been here before. And the experience, I think, helps out a ton with him. But also he's been very disciplined with his meditation also, and he knows how to bring himself right to the moment. When we're in the cage, he knows how to bring himself right in that cage,
which is hard.
Yeah, it's very hard, especially in those big arenas. You know, you have 20,000 people yelling in your area. You have their coaches yelling. You have big money on the line, which changes a lot too. But he's very good at, like I said, just performing. Every time it's time for him to perform, he shows up and he performs.
I feel, not necessarily with everyone, but I feel like every athlete, there's moments in your career that you got like a few like boosters in your confidence, you know, maybe an event or whatever it's happening, or the same way it can go down with personal problems outside of the fighting or whatever. But do you remember when it was a moment that it was a little not flip, but a nice upgrade on his confidence? It was like suddenly just felt like, all right, something, you know, kind of activated there. His confidence just went, a few notches up.
Yeah, well, early on in his career as amateur pro, he's knocked people out with each limb. And once you hit someone with each limb and you see them fall, you get a lot of confidence in those. You're like, okay, if I hit this guy in the right spot, he'll fall, compared to someone who's never knocked anyone out, so they don't really know what that feels like. But I think grappling wise, when he submitted Takanori Gomi at the quintet with a guillotine, I think he really realized, like, oh shoot, man, I can turn into a real grappler too and become super dangerous. Because the whole career has been like, when he came down to Phoenix, he didn't know how to wrestle. He didn't even know how to sprawl and stuff the head. He just didn't know what wrestling was. But we've really, really grinded on his grappling this past 5 or 6 years, and he's really starting to get some serious confidence grappling too. And I think it's gonna pay off once you start getting into the top 5 fights.
Yeah, and I know that the UFC rank, it's always pretty tricky, you know what I mean, how they decide and who's there or not. And right now we're recording this in the end of October 2021. So he hasn't breaking into the rankings yet, or did they add him to the rankings?
He hasn't came into the rankings yet. This guy was a number 15 opponent, but then randomly it changed this past week. So I don't know. The rankings are just kind of weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not like the number 1 guy fights the champion all the time. They could have an unranked guy fighting the champion any day. It's an entertainment business, so it's all about what people want to watch. So I think we have a pretty good plan.
I don't know. So now let's go back to the business for a little bit. So of course, how long you had your business? How long you started?
I'm thinking a little over 2 years.
Okay, cool. So most of jiu-jitsu teachers or fighters or whoever open a school, it's not like most people don't have a background in business or someone teaching. I mean, most of the entrepreneurs, you're learning, making the mistakes, moving forward, and it is what it is. So 2 years, it's not like a long time for you to maybe experience some struggles. Of course, there are struggles, but what is something that has been a struggle in the business that you didn't expect or didn't know? Sometimes could it be marketing, sometimes could it be staff related, all kinds of different situations. So what would you say would be some of the struggles that you still learning how to navigate through?
Yeah, probably just with each of my students, I like to have a little bit of a relationship, you know, and I've getting so many students where it's like, holy smokes,
Yeah.
it's hard to even remember all these guys' names, but it's nice to have Tanquinho, you know, Tanquinho and his brother Bruno to always ask for advice. So probably all the students. And then another thing would probably be, I'm glad I really started small. I never really went big and got a big loan where my rent's $7,000 a month. I started small, slowly built up to it, and part of me really wants to keep it small, but it's going to keep growing and growing. So that's going to be, I think, the struggle of finding the balance, when to kind of slow it down, or I don't really know.
Yeah, it's tough when you grow in a business little by little. You're gonna go through some certain phases that I was talking with someone yesterday about this. That's kind of the stage that they're at right now. Sometimes you're like, okay, I'm doing well, I was doing good, but not good enough to move quite yet. Or I'm doing really well, but not quite enough to bring another instructor to the staff, you know, to add those bills. So it's always, you know, that there's one point that, which means a good problem to have. That means you're growing, and then you're kind of dealing with the growth. And man, I think when you start I don't know if you're at this point right now, but I know a lot of people who are listening to have business, you know, might be going through this. And when I look back, I think most of the time, I mean, I don't think I can think about a different one, but anytime I feel like I need to do this upgrade, but I'm not quite there yet, and then I'll go, you know what, I'm gonna pull the trigger, I'm gonna do it. Or maybe I'll do, and then even at the beginning, when let's say I'm gonna hire someone for a certain position that I don't know if I'll be able to afford it long term, and then I go, you know what, let's do this. We're gonna give you this position for 3 months, because 3 months I know that I can afford. After 3 months, if it's working well for both of us and the school can keep up, all right, let's do it. We keep up. And man, it always worked out. You know what I mean? Because it's that fear of like, should I jump right now for the next step? You know, so there's always that fear, but there's times that you're gonna have. I like to say to my wife that, you know, sometimes she kind of say like, oh, why are you doing this? Why are you investing on this or that? You know what? The entrepreneur, you got to see yourself as a quarterback. I mean, I wish I could say that every throw that I you know, put it out there, that is a touchdown or is a catch. Sometimes I overthrow. I make bad calls too. You know what I mean? It's gonna happen. You're gonna fumble. It's part of it. You know, just pick up the ball. Let's go again. So I think that's part of the sort of the martial arts and fighter mindset, to be like, hey, yeah, it's not always gonna be pretty and perfect, but we're trying to improve, and let's go from there.
Yeah. And I think too, because I'm doing MMA at my gym too, and I don't want to be in the spot where it's like, okay, I teach this jiu-jitsu program half-ass, and then I teach this MMA program. It's like two different programs that I really want to build. And then I had a friend who was an instructor of the MMA program, and then just out of nowhere, he decided to quit and go teach at another one that wasn't super far from me. So those are the type of struggles. But then just like Tanquinho said, sometimes like things work out better when stuff like that happens.
Sure.
And now I have Drakkar Close and Courtney Casey. They're both in the UFC, and they run the MMA program now. So it worked out good. And right now I can't complain. I'm trying to keep things as simple as possible and just keep improving myself so I can keep improving my students. I'm really enjoying it.
Right on. So when is with the fight, when is Sugar's next fight?
December 11th, UFC 269.
Okay. And how is the MMA scene in Arizona as far as events? I know with the COVID, things went down. Even before COVID, it was fairly slow with events, man. It's challenging to promote events. It's challenging for promoters to make money with that. So how's the scene in Arizona?
Yeah, it's tough. There's not many shows. There's a lot of fighters in Arizona, amateurs like looking to get experience and wanting to fight, but they just had a rough card last weekend, and there was maybe 150 people in the crowd, and it was like a nice show. So it's got to be super expensive to put on. So I think it's tough right now. Tough for amateur fighters and definitely tough for promoters.
Yeah, is that something that I never really wanted to get involved? because man, I can't imagine like everything, or promoters, you don't even think about, sometimes people don't think on UFC, but everything set, tickets for 2 days before, someone got hurt, something happened, and they're like, oh my God, cancel everything, cancel this, do that. The logistics are extremely challenging. If it's in a UFC, imagine it in some small amateur events that people say like, screw it, it's just like, let it know, even less minute or whatever. But man, for people really to make money with MMA events, they gotta be doing such an incredible job, because it's so tough, man. It's tough. Do you have desire of getting involved with promotion in MMA and so forth?
Yeah, right now, no. I don't want to I don't want to just book myself doing so much stuff.
True,
And I know
true.
I can't even imagine how much time and organization it takes to even put on a jiu-jitsu tournament, and fighting all that stress and all that time and all that. I just don't think it'd really be worth it. I just want to keep focusing, like I said, on my students, on my growth, and the things I really enjoy doing than promoting. I don't think doesn't sound very fun to me as promoting.
I bet. Let's talk a little bit about your podcast. So we got two of them. So yeah, just let everyone know a little bit about each one, more details that you want.
Yeah, the Timbo Sugar Show podcast. I think we're on episode 160.
Right on.
And yeah, we've been consistent with that for I think almost 3 years now. And it's hard to be consistent with the podcast.
It is.
But I just enjoy doing it. You know, I enjoy talking to people like you, talking to
Do you guys interview, or you guys just you two talk about topics?
Sometimes it's just us two. Sometimes we bring a guest on. So we kind of
Okay.
just are all over the place. And we have a good team of pretty creative people too. Like we have this, one of my students, JX Soto, he's a super good editor, good with cameras, good at shooting vlogs. Yeah. And we started that 3 years ago. I wish we would have started it before we went on the Joe Rogan podcast, but we started it after that. And it's been super fun. And now it's becoming a form of income. And it's been, like I said, I'm really enjoying it. And I think I see a lot of people that they come up to me and they're like, man, the podcast changed my life. Like the routines you guys talk about and the stuff you're doing and the mindset stuff, it's helped a lot of people. And all I'm doing is saying back what people taught me. You know, I've had a lot of good coaches. I've read some good books, and I'm just spewing back what I've learned. So it holds me accountable to keep learning and keep growing, and giving it back to the younger kids that are 18 to 25 years old that are just kind of lost. I enjoy helping them out too.
So talking about books, what are some books that come to your mind that made a big impact on you? Different moments of your life, and sometimes depend on the topic. Could be personal development, could be finances, could be all kinds of different ones. But when you think about a book that made an impact on you at some point, what is the book that comes to your mind?
Oh yeah, there's so many, but one book I like like I said, it just, if these books come into your life at the right time.
Exactly.
It's called the War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. He talks about resistance a lot. That one's really good, easy read. And one that really impacted me is a book called Awareness by Anthony DeMello. It's a super, super, super good book. Like I could go back and read it 5-6 times. And I've recommended it to a lot of people.
What is the name of the author again?
Anthony DeMello, Awareness.
Okay.
And then another one that's really I've enjoyed this past year is one by Naval Ravikant.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the Almanac of Naval. So it's kind of all of his best quotes, his thoughts on so many different subjects. And he's a super, super smart guy, and I love learning from him.
Yeah, a friend of mine gave me this book.
Good book.
Yeah, good stuff. Now let's talk about some, like you mentioned how you learn so many different things from coaches and mentors. So what is one of the, I don't know, the best piece of advice that you ever received? And that could go for fighting, could go in life. It's just something that comes to your mind. Could be a quote or
Yeah, it was probably from Robert Follis, because he was my coach. He was the coach of Randy Couture. He was the coach of Dan Henderson. He was coach of all these legends. And living with him and seeing how many books he would read, and he was raised Jehovah's Witness also. And I was super brainwashed, even when I'm in my 20s, like feeling super guilty about everything I'm doing because of the Jehovah's Witness religion. And him just saying, like, I thought I was a good person because of that religion. And he's just like, you're not a good person because of that religion. You're a good person because you're a good person. And do research for yourself and look into things for yourself. Like, it's just crazy how much when you're younger, those kind of things can brainwash you into when you're older and you don't even know, you're not even aware of it at all. So him just saying, research for yourself, go look into things for yourself, study for yourself, and make the decision for yourself. That impacted me. It's impacted me with martial arts and techniques, and it impacted me with just life in general. It was really, really good for me.
So how old were you when this transition happened, or you to start questioning your, some of the beliefs that you had ingrained in your mind?
Yeah, well, I stopped after I moved back with my dad. He wasn't a Jehovah's Witness anymore, but I kind of stopped going to the church and stuff. But when Robert Follis, I was living with him, and that was about at 20 years old. 20 years old is when I was living with him and learning from him. And he actually, I think it's been about 3 years now, committed suicide.
What?
Yeah, it was crazy. He was the coach of Misha Tate. He was the coach. He's changed so many people's lives. He seemed like he always had the answer. And I guess he was battling his own demons. I don't know if it was like alcohol or he would always be the one helping everyone else, coaching everyone else, helping everyone else. And then, yeah, it just randomly that happened. I guess he went up into the mountains in Las Vegas and ended up committing suicide, which is just super crazy.
Dude, that's crazy. I just see, more and more. I'm glad that more and more people keep bringing the topic of mental health, more and more in sports. Last week, and I just watched a documentary on Netflix. Is that Untold, maybe the name, but it was with the tennis player Marty Fish. I think that's his name. At one point, he was the most successful. It was the #1 American at one point in tennis. Man, if you have a chance to watch, it's really good. I think he might be the first person to come out and talk about mental health, and then he found out that he suffered with anxiety and depression and stuff like that. And then the point that he broke down, he was on his way to the US Open. It was a big expectation of him. It was a big game or whatever. And then he started having like just panic attacks on the car and freaking out completely. His heart would be like tachycardia, I think is the name that he said it was having. And then his wife said, like, you don't have to play. And it was like, what do you mean I have to play? Like, no, you don't have to play. And then he said, you know what? Yeah, I don't have to play. And if I'm correct, I think he stopped for about 3 years. It was just too much. It was so much pressure, over and over, and sponsoring commitments and all that stuff. And if you already have a difficulty with anxiety and depression, it's just kind of like like a time bomb, you know what I mean? At one point he's like, but that's definitely worth it watching, man. It's good stuff.
What's that on Netflix?
Yeah, his name is Marty Fish. I think it's Untold because it's a series of different stories that they tell. So this is a good one.
Yeah, I'll definitely watch it, because even with, say, I guess maybe 4 years ago now, Sugar and I were just living in an apartment, broke, and now, especially with Sugar, all this fame, all of a sudden, all this money and all this expectations and all the sponsors and all this stuff just boom collapses. But I did this course called Holistic Lifestyle Coaching by Paul Chek, and we got to go to his house and learn from him and stuff, and really just dialed in, like, okay, you need to sleep good, you need to stay hydrated, you need to eat good food, and you need to have quiet time for your brain. And we just make sure we have all those in line. If we're feeling anxious, we know why. Maybe we skip meditation that morning, or maybe we ate some really bad food and it's making us feel like shit, or making us feel a certain way. So we try to keep that all in line, eating good organic food, sleeping really good, staying hydrated, and making sure we're taking care of ourselves so we don't let that anxiety and all that stuff just make us go fucking crazy.
Yeah. And now, if you have to give an advice to the younger Tim when you start fighting amateur, if you could have a little conversation with him, what would be, not that you want anything different, right, in your journey, but it's one of those things that you pass nowadays to some of the younger fighters. So what is a piece of advice that you'd give to him?
Yeah, if I could tell him something, I would just probably tell him that, like, hey, just keep going. It's all going to work out, keep going, because you're always just stressing about where you're going to go. But I think early on in my career, I think I just overtrained and just beat my body down. I tore my bicep. I tore this other bicep. I had surgery on both knees. I was getting multiple concussions, and I was just grinding my body because I just thought that's what you had to do to be a champion.
Yeah.
Train twice a day. Who cares how sore you are? Who cares how hurt you are? Yeah, probably just train a little bit smarter, and that's probably it.
Yeah. So talking about that, what are some of the things now as a coach that you watch, especially related to getting hit in the head and concussion, that kind of stuff? So what are some of the measures that you take with, doesn't matter what fighters, amateur or pros, what do you think there's things that it's like, man, I did in the past and it's just a bad idea, like we ain't doing that again? So what are a few things?
Yeah, it's a weird mix with fighting, with the amateur, with a young guy, you kind of got to spar hard. You got to know that you have that fight in you, and that you can keep going when things get tough. Because if you just constantly play spar, touch around, you get in a fight and this guy's trying to hurt you, then it's easy to fold. So I think sparring hard early in my career it made me tough. And even Sean's career and a lot of the amateurs, you got to kind of spar hard at the beginning and know you have that fighter in you. But now, once your skills start to get good and you know how to fight, you've been in a lot of fights, now you can start sparring a little bit different and not really trying to hurt each other. Because at the beginning at the lab, we had such high level guys. There are probably 15 UFC guys in one room, and all of us trying to knock each other out. Every time we spar, we're trying to get a KO.
War.
And it was just dumb. It was just dumb. And I had a lot of my best wars in the gym. So probably would go back then and just be like, hey, when we're sparring, you got to put your ego aside a little bit and just go in and get that work. Don't be trying to have the best fight in the world in practice. So yeah,
well, that's part of the evolution, right? Like how was people sparring in 2000, the 90s? You know what I mean? They're brutal. So it's just the evolution.
Yeah. Now with Sean, we just out of camp doesn't really spar at all. He's getting much more durable now. Before he wasn't very durable. He was very brittle, get injured easy. He was just like super fast twitch muscle. But now working with Brandon Harris, the strength conditioning coach, he's put on a lot. He's grown into a man. He's putting on muscle, and he's being able to be very healthy. But still, both of us know how important our brain is. Both of us know this is just, we're going to fight for a small stint of your life, and then you have your brain the rest of your life. So out of fight camp, we don't really spar at all. And in fight camp, you just do a certain amount of rounds. Don't spar a ton of rounds every day. We're going to probably spar twice a week until his fight, with good controlled partners, that aren't trying to KO you.
Mm-hmm.
So we've learned a lot. And it's kind of got us to the place we're at now. And hopefully we just keep going until you get the belt.
Right on. So we're getting close to the end of the interview, and I have one more question that is, what are some of the biggest lessons that you got from your martial arts journey that you apply in your life, in business, and everything that you do in your personal life? What is it?
Probably the biggest lessons are just like finding someone who's a master at what you want to do, and just being around them. being around them and seeing what they do, seeing how they act. Like for me, being around Tanquinho and watching how he ran his program, watching how he coached his students, watching him train for the ADCC, and just watching that. So those are probably the biggest things. Figure out what you want to do, figure out what you love, and then find a master at that and just be around them and become friends with them and watch what they do.
Right on. Dude, thank you so much for your time, sharing your little bit of your story with us. And for everyone who wants to check out his podcast too. So any final messages?
That's it, bro. Thanks a lot for having me on. That was a fun conversation.
Right on. And anyone have any suggestions for guests can always send me a message. Check my Instagram. That's the social media that I use the most. So Gustavo Dantas BJJ. And also, if this conversation is there content, anything that you find that can benefit someone that you know, for this video, this audio, and we're here. Thank you so much and appreciate it, brother.
Hell yeah, Gustavo. Peace out, brother.
Later.